Choo choo! Chugga 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 chugga! Ah! Millions are dead!
Yeah. Anyways, what have you been up to lately with Heart of Deimos going on and stuff, even though it's not even out for another 2 days?
Not much. It's just been... I haven't actually played Warframe for a bit. I haven't played the new baby update they did, where you... What's his name?
Where the helmet is in your orbiter?
Yeah, I haven't played that, because, I mean, he's there, but...
Yeah, that's basically it. It's more like a preparatory update like they did for Railjack before, where you could build your dry dock but couldn't really do anything with it.
Yeah, so I haven't touched since then, and the only thing in-game for me to really do is Steel Path, which has been a slog, so I'm not really too interested in that at the moment either.
Yep, you're not alone. Most people I've met about Steel Path only do it because it gives mastery rank, not because it's actually hard or anything.
Yeah, no, it's not hard, it's annoying, which sucks, because that's, Are we recording?
Yes.
Cool. I can content. Awesome. I don't want to waste talking points. Anyway, it sucks because it's clearly their attempt at... I know they said it's not an end game, but as like a hard mode, it doesn't really suit up to that either. It's just tank enemies. I don't think Warframe is very suited for a hard mode without a massive overhaul to the way the game plays, which is not a realistic thing that's going to happen.
Would you say this is referring to an overhaul of the enemies as an improved AI, or just a shift of the game from power fantasy to something else?
Both. AI would help a lot, but a lot of the AI like improvements they could do would be such a wasted effort because of how overwhelmingly strong most Warframe abilities are, that it's like, what's the point of making the AI do cool shit if the second they even are visible on screen, they're immediately evaporated? Because, like, there's some cool stuff that the AI already do. It's just most players never see it because they're banished to the Shadow Realm the second they see them.
Indeed. Do you remember a while back, I want to say 3+ years ago, when we were introduced to the first time the Night Watch Grineer?
Yeah, I remember them.
That was, in my opinion, like one of the first, if not the only time, we had an actual taste of difficulty. Air quotes, because obviously this was before Rivens were a thing, and because, at least if my memory isn't fucked up, it's because I remember Night Watch were surprisingly fucking tough to kill, even though I think Mesa was around when this was happening.
Mm-hmm. They were definitely tough. I can't remember exactly the timeline of events. I might be getting things wrong here, but if I remember correctly, they were an extension of an earlier experiment they had done with the Suspicious Shipments event, where basically enemy toughness was the same, like they could still be killed relatively easily, but they had massive damage output, so you had to really rely on the mobility a lot more, and players really liked that, so they expanded that into the Night Watch enemies, but then, that petered out over time, so...
I want to say this was part of that one tactical alert that Maru was part of. I want to say it was Project Undermine or something, maybe Long Shadow, I don't remember for sure, but I'm fairly certain that even though Night Watch were in like only 1 or 2 tactical alerts we've had in the past, Maru was part of one of them, even though she's vastly underutilized now.
Probably? I can't remember. Yeah, she's weird. Everything's weird. But it wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, good times. Back when we had tactical alerts, operations, remember those?
Yeah.
Good times. Oh, Warframe. Warframe.
I find it interesting how, even though, at least in the past, most events we've had in the past have been fun. Like the one where they introduced the reworked Ambulus, the one where we had that Nefanyo versus Alec V event going on, the one where they introduced the Acolytes for the first time, fucking the Rathum coming out for the first time, which shipped basically with the Kayla the Thane rework, all that stuff. And even though those were pretty fun and arguably good, the only operations that most people vividly remember are Buried Debts, which we had last year, which was just just do the same thing over and over in the Orb Valis, which is just Thermia, camp it, protect it, that.
Right. Yeah. Ugh.
The one that just gave the Opticore Vandal, and that was it. Yeah, people did not like that one. And then the other one that people didn't really like was most notably Scarlet Spear, which was 4 months ago, and that was not very fun.
Scarlet Spear is probably the biggest culmination of unfortunate disappointment I've had. So, like, timeline for people, for me at least, was I kind of was getting a little not done with Warframe, but interest was waning as it normally does around last TennoCon season. So I was looking forward to whatever they had to show off, to, just have something excited for. And they showed off the Kuvaliches and they showed off Railjack. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah, this is going to be amazing. And then Kuvaliches came out. And that is probably the biggest gaming related disappointment I've had in recent memory. And it just completely annihilated my interest in the game, just gone, because it was nothing like what had been advertised. It was shallow, and it really exemplified all the problems with a lot of Warframe's content design, where they have this really awesome idea, and then they realize partway through it that it's kind of outside of their scope of what they're able to do, and it's a bit incongruous with the rest of the game, so they have to water it down and kind of Frankenstein it into something that looks kind of like what was advertised but isn't really, and then they put it in the game, and then no one likes it, and so then they have a hard time justifying putting more development time into it because they have that kind of existential fear that we got to keep updating. And then that was like the most Warframe in the negative sense update ever. And I'm like, oh, geez, well, that kind of sucks. Maybe Railjack will be good. And then Railjack had the exact same problems. And I'm like, oh, that's it. It's literally the worst aspects of Warframe kind of personified.
Yeah, I absolutely don't blame you.
I love Warframe, but for years I always kind of tried to find like the silver lining in it's not that bad. The content islands aren't that bad, but then they came out with the most watered down half-baked system that would then be kind of abandoned, and then the most content island half-baked watered down system that would then also be abandoned. And then when Scarlet Spear came out, they just added insult to injury with, okay, yeah, here's the last thing we showed off at TennoCon, the Mirexes and Squad Link. Oh, those are also watered down, half-baked, kind of not really part of the game. And it's just like, oh, geez. So yeah, that's why I haven't been playing much Warframe or making very many videos. Because I know in the podcast that was lost to time, we talked about why I hadn't been making many videos just because there wasn't much to do. And that still is relatively the same. I made one recently, though.
Yeah, I noticed. And a lot of people were actually looking forward to that. Fucking it came out on YouTube. People were like, he's back!
For a little bit until I want to make another video, which could be, it could be in 2 days when Heart of Deimos comes out, or it could be in a few more months. I don't know. Whenever I feel like it. I don't really have a sense of obligation towards making a lot of Warframe videos just because, again, I'm going to rehash stuff we talked about in the Lost podcast just for people's references. It's like I realized I wasn't doing Warframe videos for fun anymore. I was doing them because I was expecting to get something out of them. I don't know what I was expecting to get out of them, but it was something. And so I realized, well, if I'm not enjoying this and I'm doing these in the hopes of getting something out of them, like be it more recognition or money or whatnot, that's not the right reason to go about doing this. So I will only do them when I want to do them. Thus, we come to the current situation of things.
Yeah, no one really blames you for moving to a upload whenever schedule, given how I'd say a pretty decent chunk of other content creators have had a similar mood of, I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. I'm not even talking about myself. For instance, Kevin Glant, who obviously orders to decommissioned a pretty considerable number of times.
Yeah.
He just lost interest right around the time Kuvaliches just came out. He didn't even come back for Railjack, just basically kind of moved on from Warframe. Mr. Warframe guy, I'm not going to quote him verbatim, but he did say something to me when I last spoke with him, something along the lines of he thought that the Kuvalich update was the worst Warframe has had, even more than Railjack, which I personally thought Railjack was worse, but both are equally bad regardless. He basically said the only thing that's really keeping him going at the moment, besides just waiting for Heart of Deimos to come out, was just making videos about meme builds and stuff like that, since that's like one of the few things he actively enjoys about the game. Tuve After Dark also kind of lost interest around the Kuvalich update. She hasn't even done one yet. Sabuchi obviously just doing his own thing, and Nightmare Frame, I think he did say that he kind of just lives for Eidolon hunting at this point. Steel Path was just kind of a joke, just meandering through the game, going about like, what is my purpose?
Yeah, I would agree that Kuvaliches was worse than Railjack because Railjack is lackluster and it's like kind of devoid of content, but at its core, it's flying the ships feels pretty good. And there's enough of a solid base there that they can tweak it without having to revamp everything. Whereas Kuvaliches, the system that was advertised and the system that ended up being put into game, like what we have now, it would require them to start from scratch to make it good. Whereas Railjack, like they can tweak it and build on it, and maybe it'll get good eventually, hopefully. Whereas Kuvalich's, it's too far gone. It's beyond the pale to really fix. So they can only try and like kind of put lipstick on the pig at this point. They can't really make it over again because that would just be a massive waste of resources. So we're doomed with what we have as Kuvalich's forever. Whereas Railjack, you know, Corpus Railjack might be cool, and maybe they'll add more mission types, that kind of deal.
Do you think they would turn Kuvalich's into something they would just gradually update over time, like kind of how they did with Melee?
I don't think so. I'm sure they'll keep adding to it. Maybe when they do a part 2 as Corpus Kuvalich's or whatever the comparison would be there, maybe then that'll be their chance to kind of start anew, so to speak. But I think for the most part, it's pretty set in stone. Like, you know, for Melee, it's always been, you know, you swing your sword. They've just been kind of changing how the sword gets swung. They haven't done anything massively changed to it, like, you know, there's no like complicated parrying system or like anything real in depth. They've just been kind of making what's there better. So I think with Kuvalich's, it's the same thing. They could make what they have better, but it's probably just because of my own disappointment with it wasn't what I expected. So I don't think I'll ever be happy with, no matter how good they manage to make what they have, I don't think I'll ever be happy with it. But I don't think it's going to be massively different what they have either. I think it's just going to be a slightly better version of what they have, unfortunately.
And speaking of relatively abandoned content, do you remember when the Sanctuary first came out and they had the community do hunts for specific mods, and over time they would just add stories into that, and after a while they would just completely ignore it altogether?
Oh, you mean the synthesis targets? Yeah, I've been so mad that they discontinued that for ages, because I've always been of the opinion that Warframe has a really great story, relatively speaking, to a lot of other things, but it doesn't have a very good amount of lore. Like, there's a lot of cool world building opportunities that they could use that they just haven't. And admittedly, you know, nothing in game development is easy. But comparatively to like making massive cinematic quests or animated cutscenes, all that kind of deal, just putting in some like text boxes is comparatively a lot less resource intensive and a lot simpler to implement into game. So it really frustrated me that they could barely keep up with what they did have, and then they just decided, you know what, fuck it, it's done. We did the 6 little entries and that's it. And it's like, but this is such a good opportunity for you to inject more world building. Or could you maybe like do weapon descriptions or Warframe descriptions, like anything? But alas.
They did kind of do that before, but that was just mostly with the little codex inscription for Ember Prime and Rhino Prime. Then they just kind of stopped doing that and just started doing Warframe quests, which, I mean, they're fun, but they're more of a one-off thing than anything else. Then after the Warframe one-off quests, we got the little synthesis lore bits in the Sanctuary, and now we have the Laverian, which it's cool in my opinion, but it's not updated nearly as much as it should be.
Mm-hmm. Those Warframe examples you were talking about, like Rhino, Ember, Excalibur, those were perfect. I'd love those for enemies and weapons and more Warframes, like, and Mag 2. Like, just have more of those. It's simple, straightforward, gives us a bit of information. But I think, again, their aspirations kind of outpace their ability, and they want to make it a bit more grand than just text entries. So they did the Laverian thing, but that comes out, like you said, so slowly. And it's like, the Laverian's really cool. And you know what? For Warframes, I think that's a fine, you know, middle ground as compared to like an actual Warframe quest. You know, just the Laverian's decent enough for how important Warframes are to the story, but it's not too intense. But like, I still wish they would just write some text blurbs every now and then. That's fine. Like, I've been playing Destiny 2 a lot, and Destiny has like the worst story ever. Like, the presentation that you get just by playing the game is atrocious, but man, those lore entries are astounding. Like, they are so fun to read. And like, I just want something like that for Warframe. Just write us a little story about like a Solaris dude going about his work, or like an Ostron. Just little bits.
By little bits, are you referring to, for example, how DE previously did little lore-related comic books, like the one they made for Octavia, and then another one they made for Rel, and then I don't know if it's even ongoing anymore or not, but some little comic book series that kind of gave some background on, I don't remember if it was Solaris United or not.
It was Little Duck.
Yeah, it was Little Duck. And it was on Earth and stuff. Or are you referring to just having a external source of lore, kind of like how League of Legends has like a massive website of lore and stuff, and Destiny has the external codex.
I like the comics were cool. Like those would be cool to see more of, but I'm talking like even simpler. Like I literally just want more of the Excalibur, Ember, Rhino, and Mag entries. Just like write a couple paragraphs on a Grineer Lancer about what's up with them, or write a couple paragraphs on the Meyer weapon, telling us about some stuff that happened during the the Great Plague. Just little itty bits. Doesn't have to be massive. Or like the Karist, I believe, talks about Tenno assassins. What's that about? Write a couple paragraphs about that. Like the Tenno were used as in Empire assassins. Yo.
If anything, I'm kind of surprised they didn't update the Karis info description with a reference to the Ashla variant, since that's literally just edgelord school for assassins.
Oh yeah, no, I'm 100% sure they just forgot, which is unfortunate. But
yeah,
I hate, because I try to always treat my theories. I try to always treat my understanding of the Warframe lore as if nothing has been retconned, and try to make everything kind of compatible with itself. But a lot of people are always like, yo, they just retconned that. And I have a hard time sometimes justifying, no, they didn't retcon it. They just made a very, very complicated and nonsensical way that the two things fit together. But so it goes, I guess.
honestly, at this point, I'm so far behind on what's retconned and what isn't that I honestly just started making my own fucking Warframe lore and making it headcanon. Because it's just simpler to me.
I've noticed people have really enjoyed that series of yours, and I was kind of leery of doing it because I was afraid that people would be kind of like, yo, don't do fan canon stuff, that stuff sucks. But then yours has been getting pretty well received, and I think BNP's has been pretty well received too, or at least the idea that he was going to do it.
Yeah, I've actually been following him on that. It actually does look pretty good.
Yeah, I'm thinking, you know what, maybe I will do that, because it's something, and it'd be an excuse for me to make videos, because Lord knows I don't have a whole lot about otherwise to make videos on at the moment. Maybe in 2 days when Deimos comes out.
I imagine people would actually be really thrilled to see something lore related come from you, even if it's just fan canon, because admittedly 60% of the reason why I even started doing my lore thing was because I'm like a diehard fan of the SCP fandom. Or sorry, not the fandom. I mean like just the SCP shit in general. I don't even know what the proper term is to call it, if there's a term for the SCP community, but just SCP readings in general and how it's structured from its wiki. I'm like an absolute fan of it. And so I just basically thought one day, we don't really know fucking anything about the Warframes, or at least in terms of where they came from, what they were used for, besides just go to war, or any sort of explanation behind them. So I'm like, fuck it. What if I just made like a half scientific, half plausibly pseudo lore explanation for every single Warframe and other shit? And by how the formatting is done for mine, it was heavily inspired by SCP readings, such as from the Volgun and other creators such as Excalibur. I made it. I said, hey, I'm doing my own lore thing. Please let me know if you like it or not. And it turned out that people do fucking like it, even though if it's fan lore, because explanation is explanation, even if it's not real.
Yeah.
But yeah, I honestly, if you do decide to do it, I would say do it. I imagine people would love it.
Yeah, I'll give it a try and see how it goes, maybe at some point. But hopefully I can get more actual, real, quote-unquote, lore from Deimos. Like, that looks like it's going to have a lot, but, I mean, I thought Plains of Eidolon was going to have a lot, too, but they left a lot kind of mysterious, unfortunately. Like, we still don't really know what the Unum's deal is. How many years later? 3 years?
3 and some change, yes.
Still don't know what's up with the Unum.
Yeah, it's just another case of abandoned kind of stuff that exists in game.
Yeah.
That is actually a pretty big reason as to why I kind of hope that DE looks at Triburos' Tower Heist idea and actually does something with it, because that would probably be, in my opinion, the best way to make the Unum relevant in a way that isn't lore related. Because right now it's just a sitting pillar.
Yeah, I think an endless dungeon would be super cool, and I hope they do something along those lines with it. Like, that's what I was hoping Sanctuary Onslaught was going to be back when it was still Void. I think it might have just been called Void Onslaught, but the idea was more like you were going through an endless series of void portals, and then they're just kind of shoehorned Samaris into it, and that changed the whole theme of it. And then they added that whole time limit thing too, which, I mean, I get what they were going for. They made it very clear it's meant to be like a bite-sized arcadey thing that you do real quick and then it's done. But I'd like an endless dungeon, but then again, that's kind of something that I don't think would necessarily work super great with Warframe's just how the game is.
Being a power fantasy?
Being a power fantasy, yeah, like what's going to happen as you go deeper? Numbers are going to get bigger, and you're just going to have to press 4 a couple more times. So it's always been like a huge disappointment of mine that Warframe kept going down the path it did in terms of how its gameplay goes for so long that it's far past the point of no return. And there was chances where like a lot of people in the community, even way back when, were like, yo, you know, you could change it to be this and this and this. And then they just kind of kept kicking the can down the road. And then when they realized that they went too far to change the core gameplay, they tried, having those content islands with like Focus was the first one, and then Railjack now. These content islands are their attempts to kind of start from scratch, but the problem is they're still parts of Warframe. So people who play Warframe touch these content islands that are their attempts to have a more kind of balanced, whether or not they succeed at that, but a more balanced kind of start that's a bit more involved than just pressing buttons and things explode. But people don't want to have that in their Warframe because they're not used to that. Like the old Focus system when it first came out was like something straight out of Diablo. Like there were skills that had downsides to them, and I mean there still are in a sense, but it's like nobody wants that in Warframe. They want number go up. They don't want number go up and then other number go down, really. It's like Focus came from a different game, and then they transformed it into something that was more Warframey, and now it's just another kind of bland power sink. And I think that that's what everything is going to be in Warframe forever, unfortunately.
What about the Necromech that's coming with Heart of Deimos? Do you think that's going to be another sink as well? Or just a simple mount that can just fight, so to speak?
Personally, I think it's just going to be a mount. The farthest I could see them going with it is basically making it into a combat version of a K-Drive. Like there's a few parts here and there you can switch out, but honestly, even that would be a bit much, I think. I think it's just going to be a fun mount, which is cool. Don't get me wrong, but not really a new system. Like even when they were using it, like I felt kind of bad watching it because like it's meant to be this big like, oh shit, the Warframe's piloting a mech, things are about to get real, but the mech wasn't really doing a whole lot. And it's like Excalibur could have just pressed 4, whipped out his Exalted Blade, and dealt with these things way faster. But instead, Reb jumped into the clunky mech and kind of pew-pewed at dudes for a little bit. And yeah, it was really cool. But from a like functional gameplay perspective, I can't really see that being taken very seriously. Just it's along the lines of like the Dargans on the planes. Like, yeah, you can fly them and you can shoot them, but just for fun, which isn't a problem, but it's just for fun.
Yeah, I have seen, and also especially Dargans are kind of just there since Arcwings are a thing, and you can just blink around faster and you can even move around a Dargan. But I have seen some theory/thoughts going around about Necromechs that maybe their purpose is going to be less for fun as a mount and more practical. Like, for example, some enemies in Deimos might be either like outright immune or just resistant to regular weapons, quote unquote, and only like a Necromech might be able to deal actual damage to them, which would actually give some incentive to using one. That's
probably the only real application I could see for them, and I don't know how well received that would be. Personally, I'd be kind of down for it, but it'd be a lot like... In fact, actually, that kind of seems like it might be the direction they would go with it, because they've been kind of on that kick lately with their design philosophy as far as like throwing Thermia canisters at the Orb Mother, grabbing the Ropalolist and then whipping it into a wall. Like these kind of ideas that there's these brief periods where you have to use another completely disconnected mechanic to do a stage in something. So I definitely would not be surprised at all if that turns out being the case. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that turns out to be the case in terms of how you deal with hostile Necromechs either, because I can't remember exactly if in the trailer, if Reb was doing no damage to the Necromech she was fighting, or if it was just a very little damage, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some like, oh, you have to grab the Void Crystal and charge it with Void Traces and then whip it at the Necromech to make it vulnerable to damage kind of deal. Because that's pretty much the extent of how they can make Warframe combat engaging, unfortunately. And which is, it's horrible to say it. Because, like, I don't want to say, man, your game is just so simple to just chew through, but it's kind of the truth. There's not a whole lot of thought in the most Warframe moment-to-moment gameplay. You're just kind of pressing buttons at enemies, and eventually the number will be bigger number than them, and they will die.
Do you think that the game overall would be less easier / not as fast to go through if content was actually spaced out instead of everything being available if you're just under Master Rank 10? Kind of like how they just nerfed the helmet system from Master Rank 15 to 8.
I don't think so. I think they've struggled with what to do with mastery rank for a long time because they kind of wanted to have that idea where, like, you know, you have to level up to access new parts of the system. But a lot of players were kind of upset to see, you know, oh, this really cool thing that I can't touch until I do a bunch of other things. Or the opposite is there's players like myself and you, I'm assuming, who are like, we're already at the max rank, we can already eat everything anyway. So they're just like, what's the point? Just put it all out. And I think for a brand new player, there's already so much in the game that it's a massive undertaking to complete it all. So I don't know if spacing it out would even really have that much of an effect on how they approach the game, just because it's like they have such a mountain to surpass that making them go up it in a straight line doesn't really matter.
Do you think it could at least be somewhat resolved by not gating it behind a mastery rank requirement per se, but or at least based on what Triviros was telling me the other day, putting content behind quest requirements?
Yeah, and I mean they have kind of started to do that, or they've done that a few times in the past with like the junctions, and I know there are some systems in the game that require you to have done some other quests. Like, can you look at Helminth without having done or when do you unlock Helminth normally? Like the room. You have to complete the Nidus quest, yeah.
I believe so.
Yeah, and you can't you can't do the Nidus quest until after you've done War Within, which oh man, this is going to be hilarious. I have to look this up. War Within, because I have a feeling they did this again where they make mastery rank 5. What? Okay. They do this thing where they make these completely nonsense. Oh no, okay, they changed everything as far as how mastery ranks work for quests. Never mind. But like one that used to get me is I think it was Stolen Dreams had a higher mastery rank requirement than the second dream, but you needed to do Stolen Dreams to get the second dream. So it's like, what's the point of even having? Why is the mastery rank for second dream lower for this prerequisite quest? So I would have laughed if War Within needed a higher mastery rank than they just nerfed Helminth to require. That would have been funny.
Yeah, people have been joking about mastery rank lately, mainly how the auto-install Ayatan Star quality of life thing, it has a higher mastery rank requirement than Helminth.
Yeah. Oh, Helminth is, I'm afraid it's going to be just like what we were talking about earlier, kind of a half-baked, you know, decent in concept but poorly executed system that is going to be kind of DOA, which sucks. It really does, because like, the worst part about all this is, like, I know that the devs are working really hard, and the problem is you can see they have these aspirations. Like, it's easy to see what they imagine these things will be like, but then they just kind of have to keep making little cuts here and there, and they have to, like, change things around a bit to make it fit better there, and eventually they get to this kind of weird amorphous version of what they had initially concepted, and they have to put that in the game, and it sucks because it's like, you guys really wanted to do something cool, it just didn't work out. Especially now with COVID and them working from home, the amount of work they've had to do is massive, and I really do respect that. But it doesn't change the fact that it's not fun, you know, best intentions and all. But
you don't think they'd ever try to sort of just say fuck it, nuke everything, and just make Warframe 2 and kind of just not start from scratch, but start with what they originally had in mind for everything?
Like I was saying earlier, there was a time when they could have done that safely, quote unquote. But I think we're so far past that point now that if they did do something like that, it would completely alienate their established user base. And I don't think there's any realistic, like, business sense for them to do that. From an artistic, maybe like creative sense, they could do it and it would be awesome. But I think they would be absolutely insane. As much as I would want them to do that, they would be absolutely insane to do that because it would completely disrupt their established user base and their source of income. I don't see there being a good outcome for them in the end. Yeah, as much as I would love if they said, okay, we're massively changing everything. Things are going to be a lot more difficult. Enemies, you're going to have to think about things a lot more. But not only would that be a massive undertaking, they can't just snap their fingers and do it. It would require them to do a whole lot of dev time. The ensuing fallout that would occur would be apocalyptic. And while the game would probably be better for it, like to play, it would most assuredly kill it dead.
Yeah.
That's just
Speaking of redoing stuff, it kind of reminds me a little bit how, or at least according to BioWare/EA, they're trying to pull a Final Fantasy XIV on Anthem and just fucking dump out the old one entirely and just remake it from scratch. Not as a sequel, but like as a revamped game, kind of.
Yeah, I've heard them talking about that. I think that would be wise because the game is dead.
Oh, certainly.
You know, they don't have an established user base to worry about. They had, like, the concept was cool, and there were a lot of people who were on board with the concept, but the execution didn't turn out. I would be super on board for that, and I hope that if they do that, it turns out well, because I think it could be really, really cool if they gave it another shot.
You don't think that would be likely to happen for Warframe, especially since they got bought by Tencent, do you?
No way. Like, DE has way less money to throw around than BioWare and EA. And I think Tencent, while I don't necessarily think that the Tencent buyout is doom and gloom for Warframe, I do think that Tencent isn't particularly concerned with customer appreciation. They're just concerned with the profit margins of things. And so if DE's like, hey, we have a successful business model and we want to completely revamp everything that the business model is built around, I think Tencent would be like, no, you're not doing that.
Good point.
I don't think Tencent cares. As long as Warframe's making money, they're happy, but I don't think they care enough for Warframe to be like, hey, we could potentially make more money. They'd be like, well, no, we'll just keep making the same amount of money we are now rather than risk it, because Tencent is a business, whereas EA, BioWare, while they are certainly scummy business, I do think there is at least a small amount of them that is concerned with, having a good name brand recognition. So they're willing to make a massive risk like that, but I don't think that's going to be in the cards for Warframe.
Then do you think there is anything for Warframe that could, quote unquote, turn things around or at least alleviate things?
I'm sure there probably is, but I'm not sure if it's within DE, if it's realistically possible for them to do, nor do I have any idea about what that would be. I'm sure there is some solution where they manage to really, without completely redoing everything, they manage to build upon what they have to make a really engaging and more long-lasting experience, but I don't think they have the time nor the means to really execute on that. So I don't think so, unfortunately. I don't even know what that would be. I'm not saying, yeah, if they just did this, the game would be perfect. I can't even imagine what that would be. But I don't see that realistically happening. What I think is going to happen is what's been happening currently is they're going to keep kind of doing what they've always done and coming out with content drops that it's going to be business as usual for a long time, and people are going to keep going and coming back to it because Warframe's fun. It's not very engaging, but it's fun, and I think it's just going to keep that kind of cycle for a long time. I don't know if they'll die per se, but I don't think it's going to improve drastically. Just going to kind of stay afloat. It's going to sustain itself.
Yeah, the game dying is kind of an extreme approach to take on it, because I think there was a article or something that came out recently that talked about DE's profit margin recently.
Mm-hmm.
If I can dig it up real quick. And
it's down 20%, I believe.
Yeah, if you want to go for exact numbers, at least just going off what I'm reading right now, it was down 18.9%.
Yeah.
Which I know nothing about business, so I have no idea how bad that is. But even though they did technically have less overall revenue, registered user count went up by 15.5% to a little over 60 million.
Well, registered user count I don't think is something that will ever go down, because it's just registered. Active user numbers is something else entirely. But granted, yeah, I don't think Warframe will die. I think it will just kind of keep sustaining itself in kind of a ongoing situation for a long time, which isn't necessarily bad. I mean, the game is fine. It could be better, but it's fine. I think it's just going to be like World of Warcraft, where, how many expansions later are we? There hasn't been really, as far as I know, I'm not into World of Warcraft, but there hasn't been anything like, oh my God, guys, World of Warcraft just fucking changed the game. It's just always been kind of like, oh, more World of Warcraft.
Yeah, I know that registered user count doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but as Asmongold kind of pointed out for World of Warcraft in the past, there's a reason why I want to say it was around Battle of Azeroth or Warlords of Draenor that Blizzard just completely stopped releasing user data or anything that even talked about giving details of how many people play WoW anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of similar thing for Warframe, because I don't think they've, or at least I personally haven't seen one, but I don't think they've given out an infographic on player statistics for this year.
Probably not. But I don't even know if that's necessarily because they're trying to hide something. I think they've just a lot going on. And even if it wasn't terrible, it might just not be very flattering. So they might not be worried about gathering all that. They're just player count's gone up a bit, but it's not anything earth shattering.
True.
Yeah, I think the game will always have an influx of new players coming, and it just will keep like that for, gosh, who knows how long. World of
2035.
Warcraft. Yeah, 2035. They got to make it so that all those unbanned people can come back. Yeah, I don't see Warframe dying. I just see it kind of walking along for as long as DE wants to keep making it.
Just existing, basically, kind of like just TF2 does. Only difference is it does get some support every once in a while.
Yeah, it'll keep getting content.
Speaking of,
Might.
I kind of wish that DE would let the community kind of just step in for content creation more than just art, because I'm like convinced that like half the reason why TF2 is even still alive at this point is just because of creators.tf.
Oh, yeah, no, TF2 has had massive mod support. I've played on custom servers for years. I love all that stuff. You have versus Saxton Hale and all that nonsense. I think I talked about it in the Lost podcast, but there was a time when DE had briefly entertained the idea of player-made quests that could then be, like, rated on in the community. And like they weren't anything massive, obviously they couldn't be, but they were just like fun little. In fact, I don't even know if they went beyond the idea of player-made quests that have community ratings. So I don't think they really expanded on the idea beyond that. But that was an idea at one point in time. That would be something cool to see, I think. Aside from that, though, more player-created content would definitely be something cool. But I'm not sure how it would fit into Warframe. Like I can't really imagine what other avenues for player-made content they would have aside from art and visuals without making the game open source. And I don't know if they want to do that.
Or the very minimum they could do is just let people play, or anyone that's interested in just making mod support basically for Warframe, just submit add-ons to the Steam Workshop. Because, I mean, just for the UI alone, that would be significantly big in terms of quality of life improvements.
Yeah, I could see that getting a lot of player support. I think they'd be kind of leery about it just because I'm sure the game's spaghetti tower, so they'd be worried about any sort of like official included add-ons. But, at the player's discretion might be an idea, but then you'd have player mismatch. Like, what if one player has one mod and another player has another mod? Then you'd have to make it so like, oh, you can't play with each other unless you have the same mod, but then that would fracture the player base really hard. It's a very difficult thing to make player-made content for a game like Warframe that's a bit more PvE-centric, and it's a lot more interconnected as like a large, over-expanding experience, whereas TF2, each server is essentially its own self-contained world. Like everything that happens on that server is pretty much 100% disconnected from anything else in the game. Like you can even make completely custom items that have nothing to do with the rest of the game, and you can even disconnect access to the regular inventories, so you can 100% isolate the player experience to those servers. Whereas with Warframe, it would be a lot more difficult just because of the way it goes. Like TF2, the whole gameplay rotation is you're going into a little match, you're playing with people, and then you're done. Whereas Warframe, like let's say there's a mod to make the Plains of Eidolon have Silent Hill enemies or something. Only people with that mod would be able to play on that version of the Plains of Eidolon, and that would probably be a very small little chunk of the player base that would be able to play. And granted, of course, this is all at the player's discretion, so it's up to them if they want to isolate themselves off like that, but it'd just be a lot more difficult to really open that up, I think.
That, or just they could officialize support for a certain mod by backing its support or implementing it into the game officially in some way. Just similar but not quite related example. Are you familiar with Bionicle from Lego?
I mean, I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously way back in the day when it first came out, it had a huge fan base because it was popular, and it was literally the reason why Lego didn't go bankrupt, kind of like how Warframe was D's saving grace from bankruptcy. They eventually got rid of Bionicle because they wanted to move on to other things. People, they didn't get mad, they were more like begging for them to bring it back because it was a pretty lovable thing they had going on, which they did, and I think they eventually got rid of it again. So even though it's gone for like the second time now, the community is still there. So some people from the community basically said, "Buck it, let's make our own game," which they're still doing right now. Yeah, Bionicle Quest of Matanui, or for Matanui, whatever the fuck. It's an officially fan-made video game, which just recently got open support from Lego, which is the first time, at least that I'm aware of, that the original rights holders, if whatever term you want to use, have actually supported the fan game. Because most of the time when I hear of a fan game being made, it gets shut down like immediately.
I can't remember if it's Sega or Capcom, but I know there is one Japanese developer that's pretty supportive towards fan projects. But yeah, you're right. In general, they do tend to shut them down. I don't know if that's very comparable to Warframe's experience. Them supporting fan games, like they supported, what was it, the Lost Sectors, the 8-bit Warframe game.
They ended up actually hiring the people who made that.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, Rebecca told me.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so like something like that happens. But as far as like official add-ons, like they could do something like, you submit an add-on for an idea to the game, kind of like Tenogen already is, and then it gets approved. But then what happens is, implementing a model or a reskin to the game is a lot less of a house of cards to deal with than, a new system or a new game. Like, I mean, Warframe's kind of a spaghetti house at this point, and I mean, for God's sakes, when they had updates, raids would break the game constantly. That's why they removed them from their own game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think any form of like official, vote on this add-on and it'll get put into the game proper kind of support, I don't think that's realistic, because just of how the game is developed. I don't think DE would be like, cool, this is a great idea, and then they look at the code and they're like, oh, that's going to be a lot of work to make that work. Especially since it's their own proprietary engine. Like, there's not really a whole lot of outside documentation on the evolution engine like there is for, say, like Source or whatnot. So I think it would be extremely difficult for them, without releasing the documentation for it entirely, to allow outside people to code for the game and then have that fit in with how Warframe is programmed. I think it would just be a nightmare behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm honestly kind of expecting, not in the near future, but in the far future, for DE to have to pull another in-game piece of content from the game because it's too buggy. Probably something like the Plains of Eidolon, because I personally don't Eidolon hunt that much, but I'm almost constantly told horror stories about how buggy and broken they can be.
Oh yeah, no, it's nightmarish. Just, again, for a whole nother reason why I don't know if Warframe can get more engaging in terms of its combat, is having so many working systems together clearly does not play well with the systems engine. Like, the Prophet Taker fights already are, like, barely functioning. And same with the Eidolons. Like, those can go real nuts real quick. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But Eidolon hunts, are so beloved. I have a hard time imagining them getting rid of those. Although, then again, no, you know what? I take that back. Raids were never really widely beloved. They were pretty always niche. God. Did you ever do any of the raids?
Mostly Law of Retribution. I only ever did the Jordan's Verdict like once or twice, but it was mostly Law of Retribution.
Yeah. Law of Retribution was fine. Nightmare version was not. But yeah, Jordan's Verdict was hell. I had a massive headache after it just because of what a clusterfuck that was. Oh boy, man, I'd like raids back, or at least something more kind of like
teamwork based.
Yeah, something where you do have to do more than just, again, mash buttons in the direction of the horde and they die. But also, again, I don't know if Warframe's engine can handle it. I am afraid it would collapse under its own weight.
Worst case scenario, we would end up like Call of Duty is now, getting updates that are well over 50 gigabytes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Deimos is going to be at least 15 or 20.
Oh, God.
I mean, how big was Plains of Eidolon? It was pretty large, wasn't it?
I don't remember, honestly. That was like 3+ years ago. Even the remaster, I think, was back in like 2018.
That long ago? Jeez.
I think. I don't remember for sure.
Time flies. It's hard to believe Warframe's 7 years old.
Yeah.
Game's definitely going to go to 10. I was a bit worried it wouldn't make it to 5, but well past that point now.
Nah, if anything, I'll be surprised if it even makes it to 2035, legitimately.
Yeah? That's 15 more years. That'd be 22 years. Oh, that'd be... Well, I mean, at this point in time, there is no precedent for a game lasting that. So I would be surprised too. But granted, that's just because nothing has had the opportunity to be around that long. If TF2 is around for another 10 years, then maybe I'd be a bit more hopeful towards Warframe lasting that long. But
TF2 is one of those games that's just incapable of dying.
I think so, until Valve decides to... No, even then, yeah, it will not die. It will go forever. Players would buy their own servers.
Yeah, I'm tempted to say the same thing for Minecraft, but I don't know, because it was popular when it first came out years ago, then it just kind of died out. Then it just made a random resurgence, and now it's just kind of not fading out, but it's becoming less like really talked and played again.
Yeah, I think Minecraft will always have an appeal for young children wanting to, play their Hunger Games and their Fortnite knockoffs, because you can make anything in Minecraft.
Same thing for Roblox, just Roblox is just cheaper.
Roblox is not going to die.
Yeah.
There are whole other games in Roblox that will not die, let alone Roblox itself. Roblox is an engine at this point. It's not even a game.
Kind of tempted to just want someone to remake Warframe in Roblox.
I am 100% sure that it could be done. Might not be very good, but I'm certain it could be done.
Oh man, that'd be amusing. Otherwise, any other pressing matters for Warframe that have been just gnawing at the back of your head?
Not really. I mean, it's hard to kind of think about anything we haven't touched on. Touched on the game lasting, and it'd be kind of weird to go over a lot of the things we went over in the last podcast, just because of like I know them now. It'd be weird for me to say, "Yo, what's been going on with all those creators I don't know anything about?" Haha. Except now I do know.
How so?
You told me about all of them last
Oh
time.
yeah, my bad. I have a bad memory.
Yeah, we went over all the players who had left and drama and stuff like that in the Warframe
Yeah.
Creators Program.
Really?
Oh, which,
second?
by the way, I saw you unfortunately were not approved for the Warframe Creators Program.
Yeah, absolutely not surprised, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I would have been very surprised if you had made it in. Not to say I think you don't deserve to get in, but I'm not surprised in the slightest that that was the conclusion they came to.
Oh no, I'm not offended by that. If anything, I'm more surprised that you didn't get in.
Oh, I haven't applied.
Oh, my bad. I interpreted what you said as you got rejected as well.
Oh, no. Yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm sure. When I saw that, I'm like, yep, of course Rahetalius didn't. Just
But
makes
yeah.
sense.
And the topic of lore, really the only thing else I can think of that we haven't really touched on yet that I don't like is how in the War Within, there was that one, or at least the original focus was just transference. Then when you move on to the War Within quest, you're introduced to transference, which was basically just that one moment where you press 5 on that one enemy to like possess it or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, duh. That's how they take control of the Necromech. Duh.
Yeah. I want to know why they haven't done anything with that, because it would have been amazing if they just said, fuck it, if you do the War Within, you unlock the ability to possess like one enemy at a time, but just pressing 5 on them, which isn't even an original concept. Mindjack actually did something like that years ago. It just happens that Mindjack was a terrible game.
Yeah. I am 90% sure that when they were coming up with War Within, they implemented that system with the intent for it to be more widespread later. But then in classic DE fashion, they just kind of got distracted by other things and were like, well, you know, there's not really a good place for us to fit this into like regular gameplay currently. It wouldn't make much sense with the next expansion we're working on, so we're just going to have to shelve it. But hey, it's back. You can possess Necromechs now.
The only other thing in the game, hooray. Other than that, is just kind of sitting on a list of things that were announced / talked about, but we don't know anything about or if they're even coming anymore, such as the Grineer Buzzsaw that Triburos has been freaking out over for like the last 2 years, the Sergeant rework, those 2 new sentient enemies that they showed concept art for in, I want to say it was 2019, I don't remember when it was, but they did show concept art.
Yeah, and then there's the carriers that showed up but then disappeared. There's a lot of that. I'm still waiting on that Sergeant Nefanyo rework, like you said. Teased for, I think, 6 years now.
If anything, I'm waiting on, even though it's more a joke than anything, even though it was a joke, they could still do it because Clem was a joke. They did it anyway. I'm waiting on them to make Durfanyo, if you even remember that.
He was meant to be part of the original Sergeant Nefanyo rework. He was meant to ride around on his little skater hover boots, and he had a flying skateboard, and he would defend his uncle Nefanyo from you while you tried to beat Nefanyo. And Nefanyo would float around in a giant hover chair with turrets on it. These are not jokes. Those were the original concepts. He had this, Durfanyo looked great. He had these giant like platform heel glam boots, and his helmet had like a giant spike on top of it. He looked like such a dork.
If anything, I'm kind of surprised you remember all that off the top of your head.
Oh yeah, no, I remember most things. They've teased, unfortunately, which is why I get so sad when I think about all that stuff. I mean, heck, I still want them to do something with Arnatina, but you don't know that one.
Yeah, what is Arnatina? Enlighten me.
Arnatina was the original character who was the boss of, what's it called, Pluto. And he was what Darvo originally was. And like his portrait was Darvo's portrait, and then when they came up with Darvo, they're like, oh, we'll bring Arnatina back in some fashion, maybe. You know, he might come back. Nope.
It feels bad, man. And judging by how you were describing Durfanyo with the whole skater boy thing going around for him, I feel like that concept kind of just ended up becoming the Null Comba enemies.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. He was the original Null Comba, or whatever you want to call him. Let's see here, Durfanyo. so stupid. So dumb. I love it. I look at it and it makes me laugh. Here, I'll link this to you real quick. Ta-da! There he is. The preview thumbnail is not correct. But
Yeah, I know.
So dumb. And yeah, he'd ride around on his little hover disc and he'd scoot around.
The fucking heels is what gets me about him.
I love it.
Oy.
And then Nefanyo's giant turret chair was hilarious.
That also ended up being just completely forgotten about, I'm guessing.
They redesigned the boss concept not too long ago, but again, my sense of time has completely evaporated. But so this is the redesigned attempt on the boss. Basically, they just brought this back and they're like, hey, we haven't forgotten. We do still intend to eventually make this a boss. But yeah, that's where that image of Neff with the giant stupid hat comes from. Because that was his little head control collar that he would use to fly the giant little hover chair around and shoot you with. Oh, why can't they add that? I want that. I want to fight.
Because they were busy making other things like Frame Fighter and Shawzin and fishing. I don't know.
Frame Fighter.
Forgotten about too.
I don't know, forgotten about. I think they've tried to forget about that.
Same thing for the Conclave, but yeah, Frame Fighter hasn't been updated in fucking ages. Like, just looking at the update history right now, the last update Frame Fighter got was in hotfix 25.2.2, which was all the way back in last June.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, Frame Fighter was never really meant to be anything. It was just a joke.
Yeah, same thing for Flappy Zephyr and Wormius.
Wormius is great, except it's terrible, but it's great.
That doesn't make any sense.
It is one of the worst shmups I've ever played, but it's an awesome concept. It is such an unfair shmup. I hate it. And I like shmups, so it really makes me sad. I've tried to beat it so many times. Never made it past Helios.
I don't even remember the last time I played it, so I don't know how far Helios is.
He's the final boss, but I want that poster.
You get a poster for doing Wormius?
Yep, you get a poster for beating Wormius, a poster for collecting all Frame Fighter fragments, and a poster for getting a score of 50, I believe, in Flappy Zephyr. Yeah, there's no other way to get him. And I'm not playing Flappy Zephyr for 50 fucking points. Are you insane?
Because the only poster I was aware of was the one for being in the index for, I want to say, like 4 to 5 hours, and then eventually getting John Prodman to spawn.
Shows up in an hour. Kick him up, and then he gives you his little signed autograph. But yeah, if you do those aforementioned things for the Ludoplex games, you get those little posters you can put on your orbiter wall. I mean, granted, there's tons of other posters, but they're all like promotional stuff.
That or also just like accepted art from community artists and stuff that you can just buy from the market.
Yeah, you can put those on the wall. I got one in there. It's not very good. I'm embarrassed that it's in the game. But
Which one was it?
It's a picture of a bunch of crewmen hanging out. They're like fighting off Grenier in the background or something. It's not very good, but it made it. So, you know, hey, I'm in there.
You can draw better than me, so that's an accomplishment, because I have literally no fucking, what's the word? Drawing ability to speak of. Like, if I got kidnapped and they told me, we'll let you go if you can give us, like, a painting, I would just be fucking dead, because my best work is just stick figures.
To make really, really rad stick figure.
Nah, pretty sure even, like, a 5th grader could draw better than me. Like, writing? Sure. Music? No problem. Art? No.
It just reminded me of, I don't know if you know them, Castle Super Beast or the two best friends play, but one of them said such a mean fucking joke. It's, writers are just failed comic book artists who are upset they couldn't draw well enough to make their story look cool.
Oh, man, I don't disagree with that.
And I'm like, damn it, they're super right.
Yeah, deep down, George R.R. Martin is just secretly mad he could never draw.
That's right. And that's why he's not releasing the final book yet. He's going to make it a comic book.
No, he did tell his fans that if he doesn't release the Winds of Winter before, I think it was July or something, his fans could jail him legally or something like that. I don't know what the exact quote is, but he said, if I don't get the Winds of Winter finished by this date, you can throw me in prison.
I think it was lock me in a cabin and don't let me out until I have the book or something like that.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's held to that, but I doubt it. I don't know. I don't even read Game of Thrones. I have no connection. I have no horse in that race, but I'm well aware of the frustration that most fans have.
Of the last season show being terrible?
Oh God, I know all about that. I watched that, and like I didn't watch Game of Thrones either because I never had HBO, but I watched all those like recaps of why it was so terrible, and I'm like, oh man, no wonder everyone's so mad. This is awful.
Yeah. All you have to know about the books is don't get attached to anyone. They'll end up being killed.
All the characters die.
Yeah.
Always.
Feels bad, man.